You know how some stories just feel predictable? Like, you know exactly where they're going, and then others just completely blow you away. Well, it turns out that whole debate about following the formula versus breaking the mold, it's not new, not at all. We're going to jump back to the 16th century to meet this amazing rebel who basically looked at the storytelling rulebook and asked, who even wrote this thing? And hey, maybe it's time we just tore it up. Seriously, think about the last movie you saw, or the last series you binged. Did it genuinely surprise you, or could you pretty much guess the ending from the first act? See, the very best stories, the ones that stick with us, they love to play with our expectations. And that's exactly what was on the line in this huge literary showdown nearly 500 years ago.
Okay, so to really get what was happening, you've got to picture Renaissance Italy. I mean, this was a time of incredible creativity, art exploding everywhere, but there was a catch, a big one. The entire creative world was basically haunted by the ghost of one guy, Aristotle. And his ideas about what makes a good story, they weren't just suggestions, oh no. They were treated like absolute gospel.
And right at the core of everything Aristotle taught was this one super powerful rule. A story, a real story, had to follow a single, unified action. Just one. Think of it like a perfectly straight arrow. It's shot from a clear beginning, flies in a straight line, and hits a definite end. That's it. No side quests, no detours, no complicated subplots. For the literary world back then, that was the gold standard. Period.
And I really want to be clear about this. This wasn't some friendly guideline. It was the law. If you questioned Aristotle, you were basically questioning the very definition of art itself. It was the kind of move that could get you labeled a total heretic in the literary world. And then, enter our guy, our protagonist, Giambattista Giraldi. He was an Italian poet and critic, and he looked at this creative straitjacket everyone was wearing and just said, nope, I'm done. Giraldi was a modern man, and he just knew that the stories of his world needed a new way to be told.
So here's a quick look at Giraldini's world. He's born, and right around then, he's seeing these massive, sprawling new kinds of stories emerge, like Orlando Furioso. This stuff is popular, it's exciting, and it breaks all the old rules. And then, bam! In 1554, he drops a literary bombshell. He publishes his discourse. And this, right here, is where he draws his line in the sand.
So what was in this discourse? What did he actually say? Well, he didn't just sort of poke at the old rules. No way. He took a sledgehammer to the very foundation of what everyone thought made a good story. He was basically arguing that it was time to tear it all down and build something completely new.
And this quote right here, this is the heart of his whole rebellion. He wrote, authors should not limit their freedom by restricting themselves within the bounds of their predecessors' rules. I mean, wow. That's a full-on declaration of artistic independence. He's asking this really simple but profound question. Why should we, here, today, be trapped by rules from a world that's long gone? And you know what? That question still hits hard today.
This really breaks it down, doesn't it? On one side, you have Aristotle's vision. One hero, one main plot. Clean, simple, direct. But then you have Giraldi's view, which is way more complex. He's talking about weaving together the stories of 8 or 10 persons. So multiple heroes, multiple storylines, all tangled together. Honestly, he was basically inventing the blueprint for the kind of epic, sprawling stories we all binge watch now.
And this, right here, is what made Giraldi so ahead of his time. His big point was that art isn't this timeless, unchanging thing. No, it's a product of its culture, of its age. The things that worked for the ancient Greeks just might not connect with an audience in 16th century Italy. It sounds kind of obvious to us now, right? But back then, oh, that was a truly revolutionary idea.
But Giraldi wasn't just tearing things down. He wasn't just a critic. He was also a champion for a new way forward. And for him, that new way was a genre called the Romance. He saw it as the perfect way to tell the stories of his time. A way to really capture all the messiness and energy of the modern world he was living in.
So, what was this romance genre he was so excited about? Well, think of it kind of like a literary remix. You take the epic scale of the old classics, right? But then you mix in all the wild adventures and tangled character arcs from medieval stories. You put it all together into these long, amazing poems. It was something totally new, built for a new era.
And you know, this wasn't just about art for art's sake. For Giraldi, there was a ton of cultural pride wrapped up in this. He famously said the Romance came laudably from our own language. It wasn't borrowed from the Greeks or the Romans. This was homegrown. It was Italian. It was theirs, and it didn't need some ancient stamp of approval to be great.
I mean, he was basically throwing down the gauntlet to the entire literary establishment. His point was simple. Hey, Homer and Virgil got to invent the rules for their time, right? They created their own forms. So why can't our great poets do the same thing for our time? It was a really bold demand for artistic and cultural independence.
So, the big question is, did he win? Did Giraldi's rebellion work? Did he successfully tear down the old system and bring in this brand new age of creative freedom? Well, the answer, it's a little more complicated, and honestly, a lot more interesting than a simple yes or no.
And this is where you see the real Giraldi. He is this fascinating mix of things. On the one hand, yeah, he was a total rebel. He rejected Aristotle, he demanded freedom for writers, he championed this whole new modern genre. But on the other hand, he was still a bit of a traditionalist. He insisted that poetry had to be moral, that it had to praise virtuous actions. He still believed in classical ideas like decorum and moderation. He wasn't trying to burn everything down. He was trying to find a new balance.
And that is Giraldi's real, lasting legacy. He didn't just win some dusty old literary debate. He kicked off a conversation that, believe it or not, we are still having today. His fight for modern art set the stage for huge cultural battles that came centuries later. Seriously, every time you hear people arguing about a new movie or a controversial book, you're hearing the echo of the very same questions that Giraldi dared to ask almost 500 years ago.
So in the end, Giraldi was a rebel because he could see the invisible rules that everyone else just accepted. He saw the cage, and he asked why it was there. Which brings it all back to us, right now. What are the creative rules of our time? What are those formulas we see over and over in movies, in music, in games, that we just accept without a second thought? And maybe the most important question of all is, who's going to be the next Giraldi? Who's going to come along and rewrite our rulebook?